Here's my agenda for today. Just an overview, sales and licenses over time so you can understand what's progressed. Spectrum is a strategic investment. We've added these pages in because we've gotten feedback from people that have purchased that more information that they can provide the C-suite about what Spectrum is and how could this enhance the company is very important as you're submitting your business use case up the chain. Applications, equipment vendors, pilots, and then not specific pricing, but just an understanding again how we view pricing for this spectrum. All right. So we are located between Verizon and FirstNet in the A block. Frequency range from 757 to 758, 787 to 788. This is 2 megs of spectrum paired, which means 1 channel down, 1 channel up. A couple of things that I'd like to highlight in terms of the Part 27 rules that guard this band is, provided that you're using type accepted equipment through the FCC, you have unlimited use of this spectrum. It is not encumbersome in terms of your interface with the FCC. It can be deployed either TDD or FDD, depending on which equipment manufacturer that you choose. But moreover, you have a lot of runway when it comes to power out, 30 watts and 1,000 watts respectively. And the reason that these are such a high extreme or range is because this was originally, the Part 27 rules were adopted off of TV analog rules. So obviously 1,000 watts out meant TV's broadcasting over a population. Moreover, the stick height, 1,000 feet over average terrain, is further supported that this would obviously lend itself to TV station broadcast. We are not a guard band, which is a bit of misinformation that's out there. The upper 708 block has the good neighbor policy. I don't interfere with you, you don't interfere with me. That has absolutely been proven, tested, and improved with our relationship with Verizon. As companies have been purchasing and deploying, Verizon is very quick to fix any filtering issues because A, they don't want to lose any customers or to knock out any customers off their system. But the flip side of it is they're very respectful of these rules. They have not only filtered, but I understand Verizon is now a 500 kilohertz guard band internally from our spectrum based on the amount of deployments that are out there. FirstNet, while we may all retire before FirstNet's fully deployed in the year 3030, I will say that FirstNet is also spoken about an internal guard band when they do deploy. So the moral of the story there is adjacent channel interference is not going to be an issue. Last but not least, I want to introduce my colleague, Bob Finch, who's sitting in front. Bob represents Beach Point Capital. His company's name is Select Spectrum. Bob also brokers other frequencies. The difference between Access Spectrum and Bob is we're a private investor group that only has this spectrum band. We're not taking in any or selling any other spectrum band. Bob has an expanded business with that. One of his customers or clients is Beach Point Capital. Bob and I work in conjunction with each other, and I'll highlight that later. We're non-competitive, which means our pricing and terms are very similar, and we've done a number of what I call paired deals, where geography purchased under the 700 has been partial his, partial mine, and we've been able to put that together in 2 different but similar documents where we submitted to the FCC so that the end customer can purchase the spectrum. So we have a very cooperative relationship together, which I'm thankful for. Let's look at year-over-year sales of the spectrum. We began to commercialize the spectrum in 2014, and I will tell you this humbly, we are the gas that goes in the car. The people building the car are in this audience. Most of you are in the audience today. And these are our equipment manufacturers, which I will individually highlight soon. And so we're thankful for their cooperation in moving into the spectrum band. This generated a lot of interest in our band because now the gas had something to go into that could run private area systems. In 2017, except for Great River Energy, that's what our sales looked like. We had made some progress over those 3 years, and the areas marked in blue are the areas that we sold the spectrum. I should say at this point that when we do sell spectrum, the lowest common denominator we can distill down to is a county. So we've made everything from county sales to statewide sales to multi-state sales, as you can well see. Let's jump ahead to today and actually have an announcement here for the first time. This is what the sales look like today. Blue is sold, which includes the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska, and green is available, less Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin, and Iowa. I'm pleased to announce that we've reached a purchase agreement deal with Great River Energy, who's had a long-standing lease with Access Spectrum, and when their lease expires towards the end of the year, we'll be doing the license transfer officially to them, but they have executed a purchase agreement document. So we're pleased to have them. I haven't changed it to blue because, again, they're remaining on lease till the end of the year. But as you can see, some very notable companies, brethren, have purchased our spectrum. Moreover, I will say, if you look at Nebraska, that's 5, now is going to be soon 6 co-ops that have purchased the spectrum. And these are 1 to 5 county deals that we did. So, and I also like to highlight a place like Nova Apache, who is a small cooperative. And so debunk the rumors that we don't work with folks to make this affordable and convenient to purchase. Back in the spectrum map again, in a little bit of a larger form. I have not blended the individual licenses between Bob and myself, what we represent. And the reason so is because no matter which one of us that you call, we'll guide the process for you as you outline the territories you want. Again, we usually ask for a county list. Some people give us exactly the service area counties that they cover. Others that have purchased here will provide buffer counties or additional counties so that they can ensure they have no adjacent geography interference. Those areas in gray that are on the map, those are licenses that Bob, Beach Point Capital and Access Spectrum decided to turn into the FCC. But I think probably the greatest announcement that I have to make in terms of the FCC licensing of our band is, as of today, we're proud to say that anyone that has either purchased or owns the spectrum, Beach Point Capital Access Spectrum, all of our licenses have been approved for 10 years. So the story goes something like this. The licenses were due to expire and be renewed in June of 2019. Access Spectrum and Beach Point Capital both, we went after different standards of the safe harbor, but we both put in for our renewals in May of 2019. And in an unprecedented amount of time, the 2 original spectrum owners of Access Spectrum and Beach Point Capital were renewed for 10 years right after Labor Day, 2019. And that's unheard of. Sometimes it takes 18 months to 24 months. The rest of the blue submitted their renewals individually. Some were sent back with guidance from the FCC, but I can tell you this, the FCC dedicated an engineer specifically to the 708 block to shepherd people through the approval process. And the last few that were still needed to do corrections were approved in February of 2020. So as of today, everybody has been approved for 10 years. Now, the license renewal process did not charge a fee through the FCC. It was actually a submittal through their website. I will say that the standard was held. The engineering requirements were not overly complex. They just needed to be understood. So the only expense involved to any of the people that, including the 2 owners that really went after the renewal, was their deployment to be under the safe harbor, And then secondly, there are any regulatory counsel fees. There was no FCC fee. The licenses now are renewed to 2029, and I always say in perpetuity, as long as you're in compliance. And seeing that most of them just came through this compliance period, chances are their next renewal will be even easier. Is there any questions on this? Okay, I will say, and I don't like to focus on anything negative, but there has been some misinformation being spread about a couple of things in terms of these licenses. One is that none of them got renewed. That's horse garbage. And the second thing that was heard is that the licenses can be seized, quote, seized by the FCC at any time. That is absolutely true, as well as Verizon's licenses or anyone else's. It is extremely unlikely, less than 1%, and it's only more often due to an act of emergency in the country. There is no readily need for the FCC to seize licenses, especially when you're talking about millions and close to billions of dollars being set out by the common carriers and others for these licenses. So it's a real exaggeration of the truth. And by the way, anyone telling you that they have a license and that ours can be seized, you just look at it and say, well, yours can be too, right? So it's kind of wacky, but I don't want to dwell on it. I just want to let you know the likelihood of that ever happening is zilch. Spectrum as a strategic investment is one slide for the C-suite. One of the things I'd like to tell you is this. Spectrum is a unique asset when it's purchased, and it enhances the balance sheet, and it also enhances your depreciation. It's a unique thing, because there's no real grinding parts. But the thing to take away for your CFO or anyone that's reluctant to look at this as an investment is let them know that the day you receive your license from the FCC, with your company name and call sign, you can sell that license immediately, or you can sell portions of it, or you can lease it, all under the Part 27 rules. The number of uses is increasing. We're seeing everything from IoT, narrowband IoT, thanks for the shepherding efforts of Bob Finch, a colleague, in working with a company called Pololi, which I'll highlight later in the presentation. And as well as another announcement we're going to be making, but standard SCADA, point-to-point, point-to-multipoint. I see my friend Dan in the back row. He is from Harris Tate, and they have the DMR solution, voice solution, on the Spectrum band as well. There's an additional application of UAV, which I'll highlight a little bit later, but those of you, I always see this as an and also, those of you that have SCADA requirements and want to also include a UAV program, the amount of spectrum needed for that program is a 12.5 kilohertz channel, very narrow channel for the command and control frequency. You can use the rest of the spectrum for payload, or you can use it for SCADA or other solutions. But it's only a 12.5 kilohertz channel to use for the command and control frequency. The bigger thing that I see for your C-suite is this concept of goodwill. As I look over annual reports of the utilities, I often see that the CEO is mentioning the support of the community, whether it be events or their water companies or municipalities, etc. You, at due course, can lend your spectrum either with a cost of a lease or whatever to those brethren, water utilities or events to support activities and meet the goals of the CEO in terms of goodwill. This is another potential use for the spectrum base. More importantly, to your CFO is to, if he or she doesn't respond to anything else you're telling them about this air you're buying, is to tell them that what they're purchasing, this spectrum, is an indefinite-lived asset. And I mentioned this briefly, but what that means is it goes onto your balance sheet and will always either stay the same or appreciate in value on that balance sheet. So it enhances your company's balance sheet. But at the same time, since no one really knows how to categorize it, accounting principles allow you to depreciate it on whatever scale your company's at. So you get the best of both worlds. You have an appreciable asset on your balance sheet that enhances your company's total assets, and at the same time, you're able to depreciate them. Any questions on this? This is definitely something you need to include in your business use case as you're talking to your CFO and CEO. One of the announcements that I'm making, I'll give you a little more detail on it, is thanks again for the efforts of Bob Finch. Access Spectrum and Beach Point Capital have invested quite a bit of money, I should say, into Qualcomm for chipsets for narrowband LTE. We're also investing in an engineering firm to shepherd us through the 3GPP process. So I can say with some confidence, based on our timeline, that in the year 2020, on this spectrum band, we will have narrowband LTE. And that opens up a whole new world for you in terms of being able to deploy further applications. The rest of these, I would say, I'll just categorize. The ones that I see generally on the deployment really involve distributed generation. I see some secure backhaul with point-to-point, fixed and data site sensing. I mean, those are probably the major applications that I see being used for people that have purchased our spectrum within the utility marketplace. We do have other buyers. The next slide is about that drone program. Again, I don't want to dwell on this and can answer specific questions either later in the presentation or afterwards. But we have been approved on our spectrum band for beyond visual line of sight. Because it's a licensed spectrum and it's exclusive, a chipset for command and control at 12.5 kilohertz means that not only can you fly beyond visual line of sight, but your insurance rates on that are lower because you do not have the issues of interference on the spectrum band. You have a clean noise floor and can operate. And the big thing with the FAA is a thing called lost link, which is the inability for the aircraft to be communicated with. These are not, we're not talking about Predator drones here, okay, that are flown by somebody in a very comfortable leather seat with a joystick. These are multiple drones that are flown through what they call geofencing software and avoidance collision radar on the aircraft. So it's a software-driven program. But just to put it in perspective, if you had one tower and you were going to put as many aircraft in the air at one time using our spectrum, you could fly 80 drones around one tower site at the same time, all in their own distinct frequencies. And then, of course, beyond visual line of sight means it looks more like a cellular situation where the aircraft will move from one cell tower or one repeater to the next and still have command and control frequency. This next slide is pretty interesting because it talks about the people that have purchased from us and who they have selected as equipment vendors. Salt River Project was our very first customer to buy, followed by Northwestern Energy, and they selected MIMO-MAX and 4RF. As we go through our most recent deal, excluding GRE, was Power South, and they selected GE. You can see a pretty balanced selection. So we're thankful in a lot of ways that we have equipment that is outstanding from reputable companies. And I don't know, perhaps the folks from the manufacturers can answer this better than me, if it's relationship-based more on the purchase or if it's performance-based. But in either case, I think you'll find that you have some terrific selections in terms of manufacturers, and as well as their management software systems, and then finally, last but not least, the service that they provide. So working in cooperation, we tend to be agnostic when it comes to our equipment vendors, and glad to be so because of the equipment, the quality of the equipment being offered. Any questions on any of these deployments? GRE is deploying. I do know that they selected MIMO-MAX as their equipment vendor, and there'll be more details about that later. But I'd also like to highlight a couple unique purchases, one of which is Enterprise Products, which is a petrochemical company, and they're doing a mix between 4F and GE. Did I get that right?
One correction. National Grid.
National Grid should be 4F. Okay, there you go. I will change that, I promise. Sorry, Chris, I gotta take that one too. And then the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska were both purchased by Ondas Networks, which is actually an equipment provider. And they're turning that into a service business for UAV primarily. So make you aware of that. So a little bit about what the equipment offering is. The GE product is the Orbit. Channelization is shown here, the two products. 4RF with the Appreza XE and the Appreza SR Plus. I did see the equipment is on the table yesterday from both those manufacturers. Cambium Networks, and yes, this looks very familiar to the ZetaWave product because it is OEM, but Cambium is doing some individual improvement that supersedes the core or base model from ZetaWave. The MIMO Max is the Tornado deployment equipment. ZetaWave, ABB, which we don't see much of, they're not that active in the market, but they are on our spectrum band. Those are the three. And then Ondas just launched these three products. For those of you who don't know Ondas, they were formerly Full Spectrum, and they've changed their name to Ondas Networks, and these products are brand new as of 2019. From a point-to-point, there's a smaller company, SAF, smaller in the US in terms of representation, but large internationally, and small, but with a pretty solid reputation is Alligator with their product line. So those are our manufacturers right now, if you were looking, and you can contact me and I will put you in direct contact with any of the manufacturers directly, or you can just reach out to them. And I want to thank you all for working in concert with us as you have been. We've done some great things out there for the utility community. My friend Dan again on Harris Tate's products. The P25 trunk core network system is on our spectrum band. Again, there's been some misinformation that we don't have equipment for voice on this spectrum band. Today we can offer Harris Tate. Downstream, we'll see how the applications go for narrowband LTE. UAV drone, you can't get bigger than these three companies. The largest Scandinavian company is Robot Aviation, and the other two names, Harris and Rockwell Collins, are the two largest manufacturers of infrastructure and radio equipment in the UAV marketplace. So we're pleased to have them on our spectrum band. If you're wondering if it's been deployed anywhere for UAV, it has. We have a close relationship with the Northern Plains FAA test site in North Dakota, and they have been testing beyond visual line of sight. And in Henderson, Nevada, with our partner Praxis Aerospace, they are one of 6 companies that are approved to fly beyond visual line of sight. So that's where the drone goes out past where you can see it. Not to assault anybody, but that's what the terminology means. In terms of pilot projects, this is a lot of, in terms of narrowband LTE coming in 2020, I don't have the full timeline up yet. We're still refining it, but I can tell you that we've had a pilot program on narrowband IoT here in the Jacksonville, Florida area. We have paid and have signed a deal with Qualcomm to create chipsets for our spectrum band. Again, there's an engineering firm that we've hired as well to engage and guide us through the 3GPP process. And the equipment manufacturers, which I won't name, but the major ones are standing by and will want to get into the narrowband LTE market on the spectrum band. We are on track for late Q3, early Q4. That could change, so I'll put that disclaimer out there. But as of right now, it is important to us to have this out, and everybody seems to be doing what they need to be doing to get us through the process and creation of this narrowband LTE. A little bit more on the narrowband LTE 700 megahertz project. Again, the company was Lowly that is deploying. Bob, I don't know if you want to add anything with respect to this.
Pololi makes the eNode B the base station essentially, and that runs on an appliance or can run in the cloud. The remote units were actually from a company called PICOM that's out of Canada. The radio heads were from a company called Surma, that's French. And so this is the initial deployment, basically taking narrowband IoT out of the neighboring Verizon chipsets, right, and extending them into this frequency band. So this, that's up and working, and from my perspective, it complies with the typical LTE standard, but it's not yet approved by 3GPP. So that's the process we're going through now. Sequan's a major French manufacturer of chips, but Qualcomm is the gorilla in that space. And we thought it was important to get them on board before we go through the 3GPP process. So it's coming together. We think we're going to have Sierra Wireless and Quectel and Gemalto and Telit and Orbit in terms of modules. So this can go in pole top sensors or line sensors or a variety of low speed. Right? This is not speed. This is not broadband. It is LTE, but it's not broadband. The low speed, very long range. 25 miles is what we're seeing in this implementation in Jacksonville. So
125 kilohertz channel.
the channels are 200 kilohertz. Actually, I think the active use is 180, and there's 20 kilohertz guard band. So in our frequency, you can fit at least 4 carriers, maybe 5.
Yes?
So you were talking about the range of 25 miles. Can you describe a little bit more about the devices that are connecting to those ranges and what the antenna structures look like? I mean, if you've got a line sensor, just
Yeah, sure. So that is for the 25 miles of outdoor antenna. It's a Yagi antenna, about like this. It's not super sophisticated. Yeah, if you're in an indoor situation, obviously the range is shorter, and that's as you get the modulation changes, right? So that's the lower speed modulation that would reach to that distance. And
so is there any integration into devices specifically, or do you always have an external antenna that you're utilizing?
At this point, it's external antennas. There's an indoor version as well as an outdoor version. The indoor version, is like temperature sensors and that kind of thing. But this was the first deployment in June.
I got you. I get concerned when I hear 25 miles from a base station.
We'll show you the charts. It's 25 dB better than the typical LTE broadband. So we were concerned, but we needed the range sprinkle to get our FCC renewal, and it's working.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bob. That's very helpful. Moving on, not a lot to dwell on in terms of the slide. You get a hold of Bob and myself if you're interested in doing a pilot project. A great many of the equipment manufacturers also will be willing to provide equipment as you test. Not looking for a long-range test. 90 days is probably on the far end. We're seeing most of our pilots being between 30 and 45 days. And we provide the spectrum for free, absolutely. And give you a temporary spectrum use agreement. And what we say is take your whole service area. Don't just limit yourself to one link or one area. Some of the pilots were specific to areas that folks have had trouble reaching into because 700 propagates so well. The other pilots are, let's test multiple equipment vendors, which we also do. So ask for every county in your service area, we'll give you a temporary spectrum use agreement, and then have at it. Test as many equipment vendors as you need to, in as many areas within that service territory that you need. And if you do need an extension, we're willing to discuss it, obviously. But there's always a possibility of someone coming along that's interested in purchasing the spectrum, and we're really on a first-come, first-served basis in terms of the sale of it. But we make this pilot and the FCC interface very easy for you all, and encourage you to do that. I should probably also note that during the time of purchase, there is a waiting period, a comment waiting period before the licenses are approved by the FCC for transfer. I can assure you that from the minute we procure a purchase agreement from you, we will give you exclusive access to the spectrum in the service area that you purchase, or the county areas that you purchase, so you can begin deploying. And we'll put a caveat, pending FCC approval, but that would be open for you to do testing or to do initial employments. We're willing to do that and make it a lot easier for you, so you're not waiting the 60 days plus for the FCC to approve the transfer. I'm not going to go a lot into this because DG will throw something at me about anything that looks overly salesy, but I will say that our spectrum price is 95 cents per megahertz pop, and what that means is population. So you guys don't need to run this. Bob and I will run this 1,000 times for you, but you just give us the counties, we multiply the population in those counties by the 2 channels by 95 cents, and that's your spectrum investment. And we turn those around usually within 12 to 48 hours, depending on our travel schedules. But we're very responsive. And I always joke, for me, this is the only thing I'm doing. So call me, email me, and we'll get the answers for you. You can pepper us with questions and requests for quotes. We send out an informal quote to you so that you can play with the counties and see if you want to add or change or whatever. It's usually an Excel format, and we're pleased to do it for you. Back again to the map. Other than what GRE has just come up with, again, everything in green, which shows the licenses that are owned by both Beach Point Capital and Access Spectrum, is available for immediate purchase. If you have an interest, please don't walk away saying it's not affordable or it's too much to do. Please move. For those of you who are interested but are waiting, you should know that terms, conditions are negotiable. And we've had several of these folks that have asked to say, commit to a small down payment, take the spectrum off the market commercially, and then pay it when they're on their back on their fiscal budget for the following year, pay off the balance. We'll work with you, very flexible, and not make this a painless process. We also can provide references from any one of these companies that have purchased, as well as outside counsels that have sat across the other side of the table from us when we've structured these deals. So I think you'll find 100% of the folks that have purchased and 100% of the folks that have dealt with us have nothing but favorable things to say. It all begins with a phone call or an email to one of us, and we'd be more than glad to respond to you and your interests.